This is Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue, released in the year 2000 for the Game Boy Color, courtesy of THQ and Natsume, creator of some fine games such as Wild Guns, Ninja Warriors again and again. Hell, they even made some of the Mighty Morphin games on the SNES, which were pretty damn good, so they know how to make a decent Power Rangers game. Or at least one that isn't total shit. Speaking of total shit, there's also a Lightspeed Rescue game on the N64 that's total trash, as well as a separate PlayStation title that exists. There's no real need to mention those, but we did, and so, yeah, whatever. Lightspeed Rescue begins with a stage select screen where you can pick from one of 5 stages available to you from the start. Each stage is basically broken into 3 phases: Rescue, Action, and Megazord. Each of these are pretty self-explanatory, but we do need to pad this thing out with useless exposition, so here we go. Rescue rounds has you searching for and rescuing civilians trapped in the area within a specified time limit. This usually entails navigating these seemingly open-ended levels and coming across additional tools to assist in rescue operations, whether it be fire extinguishers, medical dispensers, grappling hooks, or other doohickeys. You also have a nifty radar in the bottom left corner of the screen to help guide you towards a civilian in despair, though it's not always perfect. There are no enemies to fight in these rounds, but you do have hazards to get past on your way to the end of the level, and there is a ticking clock you have to beat in order to succeed. The battle round is where you need to seek out and destroy all the Batlings in the area. Batlings being the grunts of Lightspeed Rescue, your putty patrol for the season, as it were. These levels are more straightforward, though there are some paths where you need to seek out a stray Batling in the corner, and unlike the rescue levels, once you enter a new area, there really is no going back. You only have one pickup in the battle round, and that's this sword thing which hits harder but uses energy. At the end of each level, you fight a boss monster. Beat the monster to clear the level and open up the final phase, the Megazord phase, which is a simple one-on-one battle between your Lightspeed Megazord and the enemy boss. Build up your power meter to execute special attacks, and try not to get hit because you'll lose power in said power meter. Each time you start a new battle round or rescue round, you're prompted to pick one of the core 5 Lightspeed Rescue Power Rangers, each with differing stats. Some have more life, some hit harder, and some have more energy to use various tools. The Rangers double as your lives count, so if a Ranger goes down, you'll have to pick another. Fortunately, each time you start a new level, all 5 Rangers will be active, including any who may have bit the dust beforehand, and the game is generous with respawning you at the entrance of the current area you died in. Not so generous is the time limit that does not reset when you die. It continues where it left off, so try to be careful in this regard. In any event, your main goal in each level is to hit all your targets, whether it's rescuing all the civilians or killing all the grunts in a given level. Your performance at the end of each level is graded depending on how many targets you hit, how much time is left, and how many Rangers survive the battle. This seems trivial at first, but if your overall performance is poor, you won't be able to unlock the final round. Good news is that you could replay levels you've already cleared, so you could always go back and try to do better. Eventually, you will get around to unlocking the final area, which has you defending your home Aqua base against Big Bad Diabolico, and your Lightspeed Rescue Megazord, which proves ineffective, and thus you unlock the Super Train Megazord. Once that's done, the game is over, but you can now replay all the Zord levels with your new Super Train Megazord. Not that it really means anything in the long run. I liked the idea of breaking each stage into 3 segments with different objectives, and it works with this particular Power Rangers team, which served as a sort of search and rescue unit in its season. So naturally, having to do the whole searching and rescuing the common folk trapped in these dangerous areas makes sense. I like that the rescue portions are a little more open-ended and not necessarily a straight line, so you can approach it any way you like so long as you eventually save everyone and do it as quickly as possible. When it comes to the battle segments, these bits are a little more linear, but there are some areas where you have to seek out enemies to clear out. And again, you do need to clear out the whole stage of enemies if you not only want a high metal grade, but also eventually unlock that final battle. I do have some quibbles with Lightspeed Rescue. The first not so much a flaw, but rather more of a missed opportunity, but I kinda wish the game leaned into the Rangers' specific traits and applied that to the game for the sake of depth and flavor, because the Lightspeed Rescue Rangers weren't just high school kids, they were professional with actual traits before they were recruited. The Red Ranger, for example, was a firefighter, the Pink Ranger was a medic, Green Ranger flew a plane, that sort of thing. It would have been nice to see some of that implemented into the game in some fashion to differentiate the characters further instead of having them all play the same with differing stats. Maybe have them be proficient with certain tools or something to that extent. Even the first Mighty Morphin game on Game Boy gave the Rangers unique weapons. Again, it's not so much a flaw so much as a missed opportunity to give the game, I don't know, a little more depth and give you a little more reason to play these different Rangers. The first real issue is that while the rescue segments are actually quite fun for the most part, the actual fighting bits are less so. First off, taking a hit results in a ridiculous knockback, which means trying to reach higher platforms with an enemy lying in wait can be problematic, especially if they're shooting things your way. It also doesn't help that your basic attacks are somewhat ineffective. They're slow and you often have to be up close to hit anything, which is to be expected, but when the hit detection is somewhat hit and miss, that's a bit of a problem. You could hold down the B button for a bit to execute a charge punch, but charging leaves you immobile and quite frankly it isn't worth it. You do have a jump kick for aerial attacks, but hitting anything with said jump kick will also knock you back a bit and, well, you know. The addition of rescue missions to complement the battle missions is what gives the gameplay some worth, because had this been a straight platformer, Lightspeed Rescue would be slim pickings. The rescue missions were fun to explore and find all the civilians and tools, which is silly that you have to recover all your tools every single time you start a new rescue mission, but whatever. The battle rounds only has a sword for you to recover, and the rest of the time you're left to your own, somewhat feeble devices. On the bright side, control is pretty solid and responsive for the most part. Your Rangers have nice high jumps that sometimes might not work as well as intended, but these screw-ups, fortunately, are somewhat infrequent. You can pause the game to bring up a menu to pick out your tools, or you can cycle through them by pressing up and B, which is nice. And then you have the Megazord Battles, which are fairly basic in execution. You move back and forth, you punch, you charge your meter, you block attacks, you eventually execute special attacks, that sort of thing. It's not very good, but at the very least, you can control a Megazord and fight the monster with it. There are no quick time minigames or any of that rubbish. It's a one-on-one clash of titans. A cumbersome one, but a clash nonetheless. Lightspeed Rescue's graphics are what I'd like to call adequate. The humanoid-looking sprites are somewhat tiny-looking and lacking detail, making me thankful that this is a Game Boy Color game, so I could tell which is which by the sprite's overall color, as opposed to their individual details, which are usually hard to make out, but you can sort of recognize a ranger and a battling type of thing. The only giant sprites you have on here are the monsters and the Megazord, the latter of which looks the part at least. The monsters you battle, save for a couple, seems to be original creations made for the game, which is another new thing that would be introduced into these Natsume-developed portable Power Rangers games. In terms of sound, well, it's an 8-bit video game by Natsume, and that usually entails some really fine quality chip music to serenade your synapses, and Lightspeed Rescue is no exception. There's no 8-bit rendition of the Lightspeed theme, but that's okay because the rest of the music is pretty solid stuff. Sound effects are your usual stock sounds, they're punchy, they're crisp, they're fine, nothing special. I feel like I say that often, and if that's the worst thing I could say about sound quality in a video game, particularly in a Game Boy Color game, that's okay because it could be worse. That was a jinx, wasn't it? Oh well. Overall, Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue on Game Boy Color is not that bad of a game. I like the format that they applied because it fits with the season's theme and also results in some open-ended levels that might not equate to full-blown search action or whatever the vernacular, but does give the game a bit of flavor if nothing else. Perhaps the most enjoyable game out of that Lightspeed Rescue trifecta, and definitely one worth checking out as far as the portable Power Rangers outings are concerned.